Welcome. This is Education for the 21st Century. This vodcast/podcast is dedicated to exploring different kinds of educational issues. We will be interviewing researchers, practitioners, administrators, and people in general with regard to educational topics of interest in today's 21st century society. So today we have Alison Saeger with us, and for the official introduction I will turn it over to Ilya.
Hello everyone, my name is Ilya Morales and I work in the College of Education here at Lehigh. Alison Saeger is a graduate student in the Urban Principals Academy at Lehigh University, completing her Master of Educational Leadership in August of 2018. She holds a master's degree in literacy from the University of Pennsylvania and a bachelor's degree in elementary education from Bucknell University. Her 25-year career includes 19 years teaching grades K through 5 in public schools and serving as an administrator at all levels K through 12 in 3 charter schools. Alison has also worked as an arts integrated education consultant for Crayola, Royal Caribbean, and Scholastic, and has published 10 children's books. She currently serves as the CEO and principal of Circle of Seasons Charter School, a public Waldorf school just outside of Allentown, Pennsylvania. Welcome, Alison.
Thank you.
We're really glad to have you here.
Thanks.
And we'll start with the questions. First of all, we would like to know a little bit more about Waldorf education and what makes it unique. How is it different from other methods or approaches to education, such as, for example, Montessori?
So my charter school is a public Waldorf school, and it's a very unique experience, particularly for a public school. Waldorf education brings the subjects that you would see in a traditional school to the students, but through the arts, through movement, and it also has a very developmental approach, a uniquely developmental approach. So every choice a teacher makes is through the lens of where are my children, where are my students right now developmentally. It's based on a philosophy that's almost 100 years old. Rudolf Steiner was an Austrian philosopher who developed a whole philosophy on human development, and out of that philosophy came a specific strand of educational pedagogy. The schools that he began were in the Waldorf factories in Germany, and it's kind of grown from there. So it's a European pedagogy, and then it came to America. There's schools in New Zealand, all over the world at this point. Primarily a private school model. We're trying to do it as a public school. But what makes it different, I mean, I can tell you what's the same about Montessori. So it's similar to Montessori in a lot of ways. Many people are more familiar with Montessori in that it's very arts-based, it's developmental. We focus more on things that are real life, natural. Technology is really something that we kind of don't embed so much because we see it more as of a distraction to the kids. We want them to be more engaged with each other and with the materials at hand. Both of them are they're two of the fastest growing movements in the country. That's another thing that makes them the same.
Right.
Where they differ is in the developmental approach. In a Waldorf school, well, let me switch back. In a Montessori school, they start that academic piece very, very early. Ages 3 and 4 are already into rigorous academics, whereas a Waldorf school, because of the developmental approach, finds that academic piece developmentally fits in better when a student is age 7 on up. And so that those younger formative years when you're first starting schooling, it's more about play, engaging with your peers. It's not really a big thrust to put that academic piece in until the children are ready at about age 7 to start doing that, diving into the literacy pieces and the math pieces. So similar, but definitely very different at the same time.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, very, very interesting. And as was mentioned earlier, Alison's also a student in the Urban Principals at Lehigh program. UPAL, as it's affectionately known. And she's also has been a student of mine once upon a time in that program. So I'm proud to say it's really good to see her in the leadership position she's in now. And speaking of that, so what's a typical day like for students and staff in your school?
So a typical day at our school begins outside, and that might sound like, of course, everybody comes in from the outside, but most of our students have some time at the beginning of the day to play outside, just to kind of get some energy out, feel the weather. Our kindergartners spend a nice long time outside in the morning. Our kindergarten is a completely different world. Their day includes playing outside, coming inside. Similar to a Montessori, they spend a lot of time creating their own food. They bake bread, they make soup, they make rice. Each day it's a different thing. And then they set their own tables and they enjoy meals together. And the cleanup is a part of the work of their day. They have an indoor playtime that is very child-centered. They're allowed to make their own choices within the spaces of the room. A lot of homey feel kind of toys and things that they can role play with, but it's really just play that mimics the life of the adults. It's not, and a lot of fantasy and imagination embedded into that, but it's them playing with the same kind of tools that the adults in the room are also handling and using. There's a circle time, and that is not just kindergarten, but all the way up. And circle time in a Waldorf school is embedded into kind of the main part of all of the learning in every single grade, and that's a time when there's content, so there's actual academics and rigor happening in there, maybe math content and maybe literacy content, but there's also movement involved. There's song, there's reciting poetry or rhymes, and it's a very interactive, it's a dynamic experience. It's not just a circle of kids sharing things out. It's a dynamic teacher-led experience, and it changes as the children grow up. But in the rest of the grades 1 through 6 in my school, the day starts with a very long main lesson. So it's about 2 hours long. It's an integrated lesson, so you'll see a little bit of math, a little bit of literacy embedded into whatever the content is that's being brought forth. So if it's geography, for example, there may be a little bit of a literacy piece in there where there's some writing about geography, some reading about geography, some questions and answers. There may be some math embedded into that, definitely art embedded. They try to embed as many modalities as possible into that experience to make it come alive for the children. There's no set curriculum, like so there are set, we call them block units, so there are set topics that we teach at every grade level, and everything gets integrated through that, but there's no open the book to page 55 kind of experience. Right. So the teachers themselves design the instruction from within themselves and bring it to the kids from their own kind of creative craft of teaching. You know, it's really, for a teacher, it's hard work, but it's really, really rewarding work. So our mornings are main lesson, about 2 hours of integrated, just, kind of high rigor all the way through that morning period, and then there's usually a first recess. Later there's a second recess, so there are 2 times to get outside and use our bodies and move around and play. Our playgrounds aren't swing sets and seesaws. It's more natural. We have children, I'll tell you, they climb in trees sometimes. I mean, they build with rocks and pieces of wood and make their own little tiny forts and villages, and they have sand and places to dig, and they make up their own games, and it's exciting to watch them. And occasionally I'll look out my window and someone will just be laying on the hill looking up at the clouds, and that's a good thing to be doing too. And I'd prefer to do that personally all my day. But so then the rest of their day is really more about the special subjects that they engage in. So they have lots of different options that happen for the rest of their day. We have a gardening class. We have a fiber arts class where they learn how to crochet and knit and sew, and they also do weaving, and they shear sheep. They make their own yarn, and there's a lot that they do with their hands during that class. We have a manual arts class for our older students where they create things with wood, use lots of hand tools in that course. We have a music class that is an amazing music class where they begin at a young age learning how to play a pearwood flute, and then they graduate as they hit 4th grade into string instruments. Every single student learns a string instrument, whether it's a violin or a cello. By 5th grade, we've got an orchestra of students already where everyone is participating, every single student in the school. We do not have art per se, because every single day embedded into the learning there's an art component. There's either painting or drawing or modeling with sculptural materials, usually beeswax kind of sculpturing materials, flat out beeswax, and they do molding with that. What else do we have? We have a games and movement class. So the whole afternoon is really about all those special subjects being kind of brought to them. And then, there may be an occasional second piece to their main lesson in the afternoon, but that's what a day feels like. It's a very, very busy place, a very busy place.
I truly respect you having a Waldorf charter school, because Waldorf schools in general are extremely expensive.
Yes.
And these unique experiences that these children are being able to be part of is really important, and it really helps them grow as an individual. Mm-hmm. So it makes me wonder, what are the challenges and advantages
Mm-hmm.
of being a Waldorf school, but also charter.
Right. So that's really the exciting place that we are in right now. We're kind of on an edge here. It's a really exciting edge to be on. So we're taking a pedagogy that has been primarily a private school pedagogy, with a certain demographic that could afford it, and more of an elite demographic, and we're bringing it to everyday people. Anyone who really wants to have their child be able to have that experience has the opportunity in a public Waldorf school. And so with that comes some challenges, like just as you say. So, first of all, we have larger class sizes, and that right off the bat, we have a regular public school, so we're open to anyone, so we have larger class sizes, so that's one big thing, and that's a challenge just for the teachers to be able to deliver such a personalized pedagogy to the kids with a larger group. It's not as easy. We also have to abide by all the same state regulations, all the state testing, all of the Pennsylvania codes, all the charter school law, which means we've got standards that we've got to figure out how to embed into what we do. It's a design challenge is the way I look at it. And the best design challenges have lots of constraints that force you into figuring out how to be creative with what you're doing. And that's the work we're doing right now. So figuring out how to align standards appropriately with a curriculum that's very developmental, and they don't necessarily match where the state would have us instructing literacy at a very young age. Our pedagogy delays that so that the children are at a readiness place. Yes. So we have to figure out how do we still meet those standards and at the same time grow our children and stick to what we believe is our pedagogy. So there's one constraint, is figuring out how to do that standards-based education in what used to be a private school model. The other piece is the assessment piece. Assessment is a big deal for the public school world, and in a Waldorf experience, it's very much more of an informal, formative assessment model. So you're always watching your children, you're gathering information about them. Progress reports come in the form of a narrative that tells all about your child. The one thing that I do think a Waldorf school has up on any other school, frankly, is the looping model, where the same teacher travels with the child from first grade through fifth or even all the way to eighth grade. That teacher becomes an absolute expert on that child and each child's learning, where they've been, where they're going, what works. So there's no, I have this child this year, I hand that child to you next year and you have to figure it out all over again. That teacher really owns the child and that path and gets to come alongside that child. So that's one way that advantage is to us. But one other place where we do experience some challenges in the area of special education, it's figuring out how exactly do we go about meeting special education needs within a Waldorf environment. Special education requires a lot of data, a lot of progress monitoring, accommodations that, you can only go so far with accommodations before you're changing your pedagogy. And so sticking to the pedagogy while at the same time meeting the needs is, again, another one of those design constraints that makes it really kind of exciting to have a public school that's bringing in the Waldorf and allowing, our families to be able to choose it.
Well, so how many students do you have that are special needs students?
Our school's at about 20%, so 1/5 of our students qualify for some sort of special instruction, whether it be speech or occupational therapy or something in a learning support realm.
Okay, because that's right where our next question is, which is how do you accommodate children with special needs through the Waldorf way? And in recognizing the strengths and challenges of each student, how do you implement strategies to develop the child's unique character as tools for self-directed learning?
So, again, one advantage of the Waldorf pedagogy is that it is so developmental. So we're not trying to fit the child into, exactly. We're not trying to say you have to be here now. Right. We allow the child to come to their literacy and come to their math experience and their understanding at a time when they are ready. So that readiness piece is important. We look very, very carefully at the developmental, attributes of each stage, and we target our instruction at that specific, developmental phase of their growth. So that part is kind of to our advantage. So and that's why a lot of parents do choose a Waldorf school, because they know we're going to be paying attention to that readiness piece developmentally. Then in addition to that, the fact that we use so many modalities is also another advantage. So we're teaching children how to count by tens by using their body, 10, 20, 30. And so that full body experience really appeals to those kinesthetic learners. The visual arts piece, obviously appeals to children who like to be hands-on and make their learning a part of, a more visual experience, and that's embedded into everything. The music piece also creates a different schema, to use, education language, but in which to insert some of that math knowledge, some of the content knowledge kind of embeds with that as well. A lot of poetry and recitation builds the literacy piece, particularly at a young age. Instead of going straight to a phonics instruction kind of model that you might see in a traditional public school, being able to listen to stories and understand how a story flows, being able to listen to rich language, look at rich language, written in front of you, see whole words as a beautiful picture, creating pictures around sound. In some ways, it approaches all of our children as though they all have special needs, which they do, and that it may not be categorized with an IEP and labeled on an IEP, but every single one of our children deserves that kind of attention. So in some ways, the way we're teaching can really support a student who may be a different kind of a learner, but at the same time, we do have students who come on board, and any school does. It's 5% for whom this program just isn't really working, and for them, that's where we're on our edge again, figuring out how do we accommodate within the framework of the pedagogy. It's a big challenge, but when you've got skilled teachers and you work on an individual basis, they never give up. It's that persistence of figuring out what's going to work here. How are we going to do this? Figuring out how to do an inclusion model is my school's current challenge. How to do an inclusion model in a main lesson that's supposed to be whole group and very teacher directed is our next challenge. That's a frontier we're on right now, in fact. So yeah, and I'll tell you the truth, there aren't a lot of public Waldorf schools out there who have the answer yet. So we're pretty sure we're going to be the ones who have the answer. That's our plan. We want to be the ones who are on that edge and are able to say we figured this out. We have some solutions for other schools to try.
That's awesome. It sounds really exciting work.
It's amazing work.
Yeah.
And it's kind of as a quick follow-up. So do you also do the identification for children with special needs?
Yes. We have to. We're a public school.
Yeah.
So one of the I'll tell you one other piece to that, though. There's a challenge in that there's a challenge only in comparison, I'm going to say. So in a regular public school, you're doing a lot of literacy at kindergarten, first grade, and you're already able to see.
Right.
Unfortunately, I think sometimes what you think you're seeing may just be that child developmentally isn't ready for that kind of level of academic rigor, and that gets turned into a learning disability, or I don't know if you can turn it into, but sometimes gets viewed that way. It takes a child who might have been able to master that at a later stage. But in our school, because literacy is really approached a completely different way, it's not with tests and filling out things in grades K and 1. The concern sometimes is, are we missing something that we could have caught earlier on? And that's another piece of our work right now, is making sure that we're putting things in place, instructional support processes where we're inviting teachers to be able to come to us and say, I think I see something here. What can we do, to make sure we're supporting this child? So again, it puts us in a really unique position in which some students, we've got to really be vigilant and alert to not miss something that might be happening in those early years when we're not really getting into the rigor just yet.
Right, and I probably should have restated the question as kind of how do you identify as in a different way?
But of course we do, but
yeah.
But we do it really the way we identify ends up being very much the traditional way anyone is identified.
And do you have support staff?
Yes, we have an entire, every public school has to, so we are a public school, and so we have an entire special ed department.
Okay.
We have para-educators, we have, special ed certified teachers, director, we have the whole thing.
Okay, good.
Have to, public school.
Yep. And speaking of teachers, what qualifications do teachers need to be effective in the Waldorf philosophy? And kind of the second question, how are the qualifications different from private or public school teachers?
So the traditional, there's a Waldorf certification that teachers can go and get. There are several schools on the East Coast. There are tons of schools on the West Coast because that's really where Waldorf is really hot and popping and growing right now. On our side of the country, there are several schools that offer training to teachers. Even if it's just come and do a session to learn about what's going to happen in the next grade that you take on, remembering that they loop, they have to go and kind of learn that what are some of the ways that this has been brought in the past. The hard hard part about being a public school is we've got to have, a public charter in Pennsylvania has to have 75% of their teachers Pennsylvania state certified. So 75% of our teachers have to have that state certification. It's really, really hard to find someone with an elementary education degree and a Waldorf certification on the East Coast. And so we've gone in favor of the Pennsylvania state certification, and then we train our teachers. Our school in particular is looking at bringing in a university from the West Coast to come to our school and train our entire staff at one time, get them all Waldorf certified at the same time. So it requires a dual certification and two. You got to go through your 4 years of your university training, and you've got to get that bachelor's degree, go through the praxis, get that Pennsylvania cert, and then if you really want to be a candidate for a school like mine, you should go get that Waldorf cert before you come. But most public Waldorf schools, because we know there aren't loads and loads of teachers out there like that just waiting to come to our school, we look for the people who seem inclined and open. They enjoy integrating a lot of different modalities into one lesson. They're not what do I want to say, teacher guide dependent, I guess, that they really want to bring it from themselves. They're very creative and innovative that way. So we're looking for teachers like that, and then we know that's a person who's going to be inclined to embrace the pedagogy we're bringing forth to our kids.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
On your website, you talk about the 4 C's. Can you describe what they are, what they stand for, and how they're implemented into your classroom,
So-
and how that might differ from other Waldorf schools?
Sure. So it's the 4 C's of the 21st century learning. So it's our communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity that all 21st century schools, really are supposed to be focusing in on. Those are the 21st century skills of the future. The way our Waldorf school and most Waldorf schools handle it, it's really embedded into the pedagogy. I mean, the creativity piece, I think I've already spoken to. Our children are really reaching out in lots of different ways, or at least having the opportunity to learn how they might express themselves musically, visually, using movement, and then as well as using, writing and speaking. The critical thinking part, what's interesting, I will say about our Waldorf pedagogy is our approach to science. The term that we use, so the regular education community will call experiential learning. In the Waldorf world, it's called phenomenological learning. So we present a phenomenon in front of you, and we don't give the answer. We allow the children time to wonder about it, inquire about it, and just be in that place of curiosity. And that curiosity right there sort of embeds questions. And students start asking questions, and then giving them the leeway to be able to test out some of those answers and figure out and learn things developmentally themselves, wherever they are and, at their age, to approach a phenomenon from their own piece of wonderment. And thereby develop those critical thinking skills, So we've got teachers around them, helping them to formulate those questions and to be able to ask them. And but what if? But how does and why can't I? And could we try this? It kind of builds that from the inside instead of giving them a list of critical thinking skills on a worksheet and saying, you're going to think you're going to do higher level questions today. Having them create them from their own sense of wonder is where we come from. So that's the critical thinking piece and how it's kind of unique to a Waldorf pedagogy. Communication is a good one. Obviously that's an important skill everywhere. I think a lot of schools focus on the reading and the writing piece. I would say we get the full literacy at a Waldorf school. It's not just reading and writing, but it's really heavy speaking and listening, particularly at the younger grades. We focus on speaking, listening heavily. There's so much storytelling. Our teachers are telling stories constantly. Every day a new story comes out, and the children attend to that story, and then they become storytellers as well. They retell the stories, and they do different kinds of visual art renderings of the stories. They act out the stories. The stories play into their math experiences. Even the math experiences have stories. Yesterday there was a tortoise and the hare story that connected to how our hand and minute hand worked, and it was just beautifully delivered. I saw that in one of my classrooms. So the idea of storytelling is that speaking and listening. In a Waldorf school, we start writing before we start reading. So we have children expressing language on paper prior to really delivering that intense, rigorous reading instruction. So they're utilizing their understanding of sound and letter from within before they start receiving it from without. So that communication piece, I think, it's got the full 4 in it. And then collaboration. Being in the same cohort for 5 years with the same teacher, you really do learn the nuances of the other people in the class, and you learn how to work with a leader. over the span of time, and as you develop and the teacher's able to work with you to develop those collaborative skills, it's really, really a beautiful thing. So the looping thing, definitely contributes to the idea of collaboration. But, a lot of the work of the Waldorf, particularly the specialty subjects that they do in the afternoons, it really inherently becomes a collaborative experience for most of our children. So those are the 4 C's. They should be familiar to anybody who's in the field of education, but that's kind of how they're delivered a little differently in a Waldorf school.
That's awesome. I love your enthusiasm. Yes. So can you tell us a little bit about your student population?
Sure.
Can you describe them in terms of demographics?
Sure. So our students come from, we're here in the Lehigh Valley, so they come from all over the Lehigh Valley and beyond. I mean, we've got students coming in from Harrisburg, East End. Yeah, really.
Wow.
East End. We've got some people pretty far up north and coming up from not all the way to Philadelphia, but people who feel that they're pretty close to Philadelphia, frankly, and they really, really want a Waldorf experience. They'll drive their children up here. It's free, for goodness sake. It's usually a really expensive opportunity. Our students, 75% of my student population is white. We have about 11% of our students are economically disadvantaged, and that's what we're projecting right now. We're still gathering data on that. I just got there, so I'm still gathering that data pretty intensely. My personal opinion, having come from a different kind of a school before I came here, is that I'd like to see a more diverse population, and being able to bring that to all of our communities. And we've got students from everywhere, from farms to inner city and everything in between. But I really think that getting that message out, making more families familiar with what we have to offer, is a key. I will say again, this was predominantly a private school model, and it was really for a certain sector of society who could afford it and make it available for their children. So until the knowledge of what it is gets out there to all of the communities, we're still in a place where I know I'm not seeing us being as diverse as I'd like us to be just yet.
All right. Well, and that pretty much does it for our formal questions.
And yet there's one
Sorry.
more.
Or 2.
Yeah. There's
There's a second
little bit more.
sheet.
We do have another question, and I have an additional question, I should say. Tell us this: what message would you like to give both to educators and parents looking for an alternative from the traditional educational system?
What message? Lots of messages. I mean, I guess what I'd like to say is a Waldorf school may not be for every family. The fact that we are not technology heavy and we have some pretty firm beliefs about technology, was particularly with our younger students. We see technology as more of a distraction. Our classrooms don't have smart boards. We don't have a one-to-one laptop thing. Our students pretty much through grade 4 are going to see very limited technology in the classrooms. They're using real materials, working with real books, real humans. You're more likely to see, I'm going to be honest with you, you're more likely to see a flour mill in a classroom than you are a laptop. And my 3rd graders can tell you the difference between a flour mill and a cider press. And they can use all of the engineering language around that, but they aren't sitting on laptops. They're not using iPads. So if that's not something that you're open to, then I could see a Waldorf school not being for you. But if you are someone who wants your child to be engaged in real life experiences, so you'd like to see your child go to 3rd grade and learn all about farms and build their own shelter outside, maybe build their own oven, that sort of thing, and have real life experiences that are rich and authentic and come from the teachers themselves, and they come to the children, living, not on a piece of paper, then this is a school that I think would appeal. If you're a parent who's looking for something for your child that is very arts-based, really plays to all the modalities, allows the child to be creatively expressive, this would be a school for your child. If you like your child to be outside a lot, again, a Waldorf school offers that kind of an opportunity. Recess is a really important part of what we do. It's not just, okay, break for the teacher, run around outside. It's a very important part of what we do with our kids. So I guess that's the message I'd want to give. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Okay.
How do you measure a student's level of success at your school?
Good question.
Yeah.
So growth is our thing. We grow children. one of the ways, ironically, that we are currently measuring our student success, because it's a completely outside of our world measure, is using the state testing. And so what's interesting is we're provided with a growth measure, the Pennsylvania Value-Added Assessment System. Lets us know are our children growing, and we know they are. We know inside, in our in-house, we know they're growing. We have our own ways of benchmarking and even just the informal monitoring. Our teachers know, and when they're not growing, we know. We're on that. But looking at our standardized test scores, and the way that we're showing growth over time, we know we're growing kids. We even have outside evidence that we're growing them more than 1 year's worth of growth. So that's a big deal. As much as we're not like all about that test thing, and we are, we'd still do it. We're looking to grow our kids, but when we get data like that back that actually emphasizes the fact that indeed you are growing children, boy, that's nice. Let me rock it. We're so happy about that. But inside of our school, we've got our own internal benchmarks. We know where we want our children to be, ideally by a certain time. And it's not even so much you got to be here, but it's more we've seen this much growth over this period of time. And if we're noticing that some of the concepts we're bringing to through all these different modalities don't seem to be internalizing, we have ways that we go about bringing traditional interventions and that sort of thing to help our kids. So we're still also we'd like to develop our own internal benchmarking that kind of tailors a little bit more to what Pennsylvania's asking. So that's another on the edge opportunity that we've got to do something kind of creative. So
So you're not using traditional assessment methods. So you don't have grades, I would assume.
Not until middle school. Up to middle school. I mean, we do have let's say a couple layers. Our parents come to parent night several times a year, where the teacher kind of goes over how literacy is being approached this year, how we're doing math this year, shares what the upcoming blocks of the units are going to be. Our parents have parent-teacher conferences. Obviously, our teachers are experts on our kids, so those are very. I mean, if you think about it, if you had someone who's an expert on your child telling you this is where they are now, what a wonderful gift that is. Our report cards at the end of the year are lengthy narratives. It's just a lengthy description of, here's how your child has grown this year and the experiences they've had. So no grades. We do have checklists that kind of indicate some, here are some behaviors that we're seeing that are, promising that we're trying to nurture, but not report cards per se. Yeah, good question.
And one of the follow-up questions I had was we're gonna connect now a little bit of your higher ed experience to your K-12 experience. How did or is the Lehigh Urban Principals Academy, the UPAL experience, how has it prepared you for the role you're in right now?
So many ways. I could do an entire radio show just like this. I could. It's funny that you say it, because we just, for the course I just completed, I created a whole presentation on how it's preparing me. The reality of, I couldn't do what I'm doing right now, so I just shifted into this school while I'm in the middle of the UPAL program, which is a really good thing I'm in the UPAL program at this time, because it really has provided, but honestly it has provided me with guidance. John Drescher has provided guidance. My cohort provides support. We're meeting all the time, but there are also some habits of mine that even just from the summer courses they just happen. I'll give you a couple of examples of things that have made an impact. One of them is I journal. I journal every day. I get up early to journal every single day. One of the things that we do in UPAL, we've got a set of prompts, which at first I was like, these aren't prompts, they're just words. Nope, they're not just words. I choose one every day, and I journal, and I go into my day with an intention and an understanding of this is, I want to keep my frame of mind around this important leadership piece. So that's one. Another one is viewing. So in one of our courses, it was a lot of case studies. I love the case studies. Not everybody did. Some of my classmates were like, case studies, these are such a pain. I love the case studies. And the reason I love the case studies is because every day as an educational leader, and I'm a school administrator, my whole day is case studies. It's like someone drops by my office every day and next case study, figure this out, next figure, and it's in rapid succession, so that you're constantly having to do what we learned, which is look through the four lenses. We look at things through what's the political lens, what's the human resource lens, what's the symbolic lens, and I forget the fourth one, but there's another one. Which one did I miss? I know them all because yes, the structural lens. What are the structures that I have in place here that are impacting what I'm dealing with right now? Exactly. Yes, high five. Nice job. So looking through those lenses, that practice that completely carried over. So, and even when I'm having conversations with, my administrative team or with my teaching teams, I'm able to use that language and help everyone understand the different ways we have to look at, issues that we're confronting or things that moves we want to make, that sort of thing. One of the pieces, asking me about my demographics, and I've come from 2 years in an inner city Philadelphia high school, so my worldview is very different now, and coming to this school, recognizing the level of privilege, I don't even know. I couldn't not. It was like boom, right in my face as soon as I got there, and realizing that not everyone recognizes the level of privilege that is inherent to the world of Waldorf, and understanding that we do have to acknowledge that and become aware of the ways that we might be building in privilege into our structures, I guess, for lack of a better word, but looking at, how do we do enrollment, and how inclusive are our enrollment practices, our family nights, our location, how inclusive is that, just looking at how inclusive are we, and starting to kind of have the conversation, which I haven't completely had yet with everyone, but how do we make our school more inclusive? If we really believe in what we're doing, then we believe that it's something that we want to bring to everyone. So that's another lens that, I think I brought from UPAL.
So we talked about your the ethnicity of your students. What about your staff?
100% white.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you find that that's because is there a relationship, have you found, between ethnicity and interest in this kind of education?
Absolutely, and that's my point. It's a private school model, which doesn't mean that there's only a certain demographic that attends private schools, but there's a certain economic level that only attends private schools, and that's a gift. I mean, that's nothing to say there's anything wrong with that. It's great. It's a great opportunity, but that means that the word Waldorf means something to some people. It doesn't mean something to all people. It's still not something everyone has had access to in the past, and that's where we're breaking ground. That's where we're saying, we're breaking ground, and our families feel that same way. They're thrilled to be a part of something that is, it's blazing a trail. It's bringing something that has really been reserved only for a certain section of our population and bringing it to everyone. Anyone and everyone can be a part of this. And the fact that we, are a lottery-based system means that any student, that can get themselves to our school for the most part, has the opportunity to be a part of this experience. So yeah, the fact that it was a private school construct is one of those reasons why, there are some things that have to be addressed. And being able to actually go into communities and have communities understand, this is an option for you. Just like, other charter schools often are presented as an option for a family, we are that same kind of option, but to understand what it is, I think, is the important piece. Yeah, that's our job.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. As you were talking, it took me back to our, the class we had in the summer was instructional leadership. And I think we talked a lot about excellence and equity, and a lot of the things that you're reflecting on right now that actually happen in practice, that you're actually looking at. We had some of those tough conversations within our class, so I'm glad to know that the UPAL program, which has all of that embedded in it, is preparing our school leaders for exactly what they're running into in the actual practice. And
definitely is.
Check out our website.
So with that, any final questions from our distinguished panel here?
I'm just extremely happy that you were able to come and share your knowledge, and maybe this will help bring more of a diverse body of people to your school as well.
That's what I'm hoping for.
Yes. Thank you for being so willing to come and spend this time with us, because it is something that, yes, we need to spread the word about this opportunity.
Right.
All right, so if people want to know more about your school, how can they find out additional information?
They can go right to circleofseasonsschool.org. Circleofseasonsschool.org.
Okay, excellent. And with that, folks, we'll go ahead and wrap up for now. Thank you once again if you're watching this or if you're listening to this on the podcast. Education for the 21st Century. This has been our third show at this particular point. So we've had some excellent guests, and we want to thank you for viewing and listening. And want you to stay tuned for our next vodcast/podcast. We want to thank our guests. We want to also thank our panel here. We want to thank Lehigh University, CDual, College of Education, and we'll see you or you'll hear from us next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.